I graduated from college at a time when stable jobs were scarce, and most of my day was spent out on the streets. Back then, I chose to be a delivery driver, a profession often looked down upon by many. Yet, even knowing it was scorned, my daily earnings were decent enough to help me get through the immediate hardships. I rented a room in a boarding house for laborers, tucked away deep inside a small alley off Lin Nam Street. It was bearable during the day, but at night, it was truly frightening. There were only a few scattered streetlights, not like the abundance of today. I worked all day and only returned home late, so each time I reached my door, I was utterly exhausted. Every time Mrs. Land saw me coming home late, she would say, "You look so tired and frail. How about I ask my kids if there's any work available? I could help you get a position." I was thrilled when Mrs. Land said that. Finding a job back then was incredibly difficult. Even though I graduated college with honors, my family's financial situation was tough, and I had no connections, so I couldn't secure a job. If I did get an interview, I was rejected because they always demanded work experience. How could a fresh graduate like me have the experience they asked for? I went to ask Mrs. Land, "Ma'am, for the jobs your 2 children are doing, do they require any experience?" Mrs. Land looked at me and smiled. "My 2 kids, they don't need any experience. If you join and don't know the ropes, the senior workers will mentor you. Just know that, okay? When my 2 kids come home, I'll ask them to help. I'll call you afterward if there's anything." I nodded and said yes, secretly hoping that one of her children could help me get a stable job. I often thought that clinging to this delivery job constantly on the road wasn't good for my health. When I returned to my room, I unlocked the door, wheeled my motorbike inside, took off my uniform jacket, and hung it on the hook on the wall, just as I did every day. My room was quite messy today, so I started cleaning up. While tidying, I heard footsteps outside. But what was strange was that as the footsteps drew near my room, I stopped cleaning and turned to see who was outside. My room was the first one in the boarding house, so anyone passing by would be visible because I always left my door open to let the fresh air in. I waited for a long time but saw no one passing by my room, which struck me as odd, so I stepped out. But as soon as my feet landed outside, there was no one. Most of the other rooms in the boarding house, when their doors opened outwards, were all closed. How strange! I clearly heard footsteps, so why was there no one just now? I pondered this in my head, but didn't consider anything supernatural or ghostly. At that time, I was quite bold and rarely believed in such spiritual matters. Quickly, I dismissed those thoughts. I went back to my room, and it was already past 11 p.m. I took a quick shower, and then went to bed. I'm called bold, because I often left my door wide open like that, not closing it. Anyone in the boarding house could easily enter my room. Many times, Mrs. Land reminded me about it, but I always ignored her. I always thought this room had no value beyond my motorbike, which earned me a living, so I didn't listen to her. Everything seemed to go on as usual. Until one day, I encountered something strange that completely changed my perspective on the spiritual. That day, I returned to the boarding house at 10:30 p.m. instead of the usual 12 a.m. I'd had a bad day at work, encountering many unsatisfactory things, so I decided to come home early. Anyone working in the gig economy would understand the issue I'm talking about. When I arrived at the boarding house, I saw all the doors in the complex were open. However, not a single room had its lights on. Only my room was closed and locked, exactly as I had left it. I thought it was still early, so everyone might have left their doors open to cool down, as the weather was muggy, and it would probably rain in a few minutes. I wheeled my motorbike inside, hung my shirt on the hook on the wall, and prepared to shower. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise coming from one of the rooms in the boarding house. The sound I'm talking about was very peculiar. I don't know how to describe it to you here. I, bare-chested, still curious, started walking towards room number 2 in the boarding house to see where that strange sound was coming from. The first few rooms showed nothing. Inside, some guys smiled and waved at me. But when I reached the 7th room, near the end of the complex, I stopped because the person inside was not Tom, but an old man. Looking at him, I guessed he must be over 50. Thinking he might be Tom's father visiting from the countryside, I immediately asked Uncle, "Are you here to visit Tom? Why aren't the lights on? It's so dark." After hearing my question, the old man inside suddenly stood up. He didn't walk like a normal person. He seemed to float just above the ground. He glided to the corner of the room and vanished right into the wall next to the bathroom. At that moment, I knew I had just seen a ghost. Before I could even recover my wits, Tom arrived, saw me standing outside his room, and immediately patted my shoulder, startling me. "Lamb, what are you doing standing there like a statue outside my room? Is something wrong? Why are you home so early?" I quickly pulled Tom into my room and told him I just saw a ghost in your room. "What are you talking about, man? A ghost in my room? You can joke about anything else, but don't joke about that. It's not funny," Tom said. I pointed to the corner of the wall where the old man had floated to and vanished. "I swear, I'm telling the truth. What benefit would I get from making this up to scare you?" I poked my head into his room and flipped on the light switch. "Oh, come on, man. What time is it? And you're still talking about ghosts to scare people? I'm not scared. You live at the very end of the hall with all those ladies." In my boarding house, only the first 4 rooms were occupied by men. The rest of the hall was all women, and those women were older than me. They were all straight. So even if I was offered more money, I wouldn't dare go near them. Hearing Tom's disbelief, I was utterly frustrated and annoyed. I stomped back to my room and slammed the door shut, still hearing Tom's mocking laughter. I secretly wished that the old man I had just seen would reappear to Tom so he wouldn't think I was delusional. The entire boarding house had lost power, which was why the doors were open like that. I was too hot to bear it, so I immediately went to take a shower. While showering, I heard someone knocking on my door. I thought it was Tom, still teasing me for being scared. But when I spoke, there was no reply. Yet the knocking continued rhythmically. Annoyed, thinking Tom was just messing with me, I quickly wrapped a towel around myself and rushed out of the room to open the door. But strangely, when I opened it, there was no one outside. If it were Tom, I would have heard his footsteps running back to his room. Thinking the neighbor might need something, I went to ask, but he said he hadn't knocked and hadn't heard anything either. He chuckled. "Why are you acting so strange today? Are you dreaming?" When he asked that, I didn't know what to say, so I just forced a smile and awkwardly returned to my room. I returned to the bathroom, dried myself, and got dressed. But the moment I opened the door and stepped out, I was so terrified I almost fainted on the spot. Because the old man I had seen in Tom's room earlier was now sitting on my bed. I wanted to scream, but couldn't, as if my throat was seized. I wanted to run, but my feet were glued to the floor, as if my entire body refused to obey my brain's command. Suddenly, the man stood up, but his feet didn't touch the ground. He simply floated towards the wall in front of him, passing through it into the next room, right before my eyes, filling me with even greater horror. At this point, I finally managed to utter a cry and immediately fled the room. Hearing my shriek, everyone came over to ask what was wrong, but no one believed me, thinking I was just tired and hallucinating. The story of me seeing a man walk through a wall quickly became the talk of the neighborhood and the tea stalls around the boarding house. But most people remained skeptical. Some even called me crazy. One day, when I was on my way to work, I stopped to buy a cup of iced tea and a pack of Thang long cigarettes. The vendor lady, Mrs. Hang, after I handed her the money, and she took it, paused for a few seconds before saying to me, "They don't believe you, but I believe ghosts are real. Dear, if you saw that spirit, then there must truly be a ghost in Mrs. Land's boarding house. You should tell her. Maybe she'll invite a master to perform a ritual. Otherwise, you won't be able to live there. Or perhaps it's better to just move somewhere else, dear." Hearing Mrs. Hang say that, I was also scared. But now, no one in the boarding house believed me. I was afraid that telling Mrs. Land, the landlady, wouldn't make any difference. I just nodded at Mrs. Hang, dismissed the conversation, and returned to the boarding house. The men in the boarding house were all right, but the women, ever since my midnight scream, started avoiding me, not daring to come close. It wasn't because they were scared of ghosts. They thought I had mental problems. It was quite disheartening to see. Back in my room, as I opened the door and wheeled my motorbike inside, a voice echoed in my ear, startling me. "Help me find my daughter." I can't find my daughter. I turned around and, oh no, there was the old man, appearing right behind me, so close that I could clearly see his gruesome, blood-splattered face. I woke up in a hospital. Tom and Mr. Kwang, my neighbor, had brought me here. It took a whole day for me to fully regain consciousness. They told me I had been in a coma for 3 days. 3 days? I thought, was it just a faint or something deeper? I sat up, my entire body sore. Yet my physical body seemed fine, and my mind was still clear. Tom immediately asked me, "What happened to you that made you faint?" After hearing your scream, I rushed over and found you lying on the floor. I thought you had tried to take your own life. Good thing I got you to the hospital in time, or you'd be gone. At this moment I reached up, and indeed my head was bandaged. I must have hit my head when I fainted. I then recounted to Tom and Mr. Kwang what had happened. That night, the old man whom I was sure was a ghost, appeared again, asking if I had seen his daughter. He was standing right behind me, and when I turned around, his face was covered in blood. I was so terrified that I fainted on the spot and didn't remember anything after that. Hearing my story, Tom and Mr. Kwang exchanged glances but said nothing, silently thinking I was talking nonsense. From their expressions, I guess they didn't believe me. But still, saving my life was their doing, and I owed them another debt of gratitude. We were neighbors, always there for each other. I then asked them, "Do you need to call my parents? Just let them know. When you brought me to the hospital, you couldn't find my phone to call them." At the mention of my phone, I didn't remember taking it out when I got back to my room. Losing my phone would be a hassle. It was my only tool to earn a living besides my motorbike. Tom looked blank, but Mr. Kwang quickly said, "Don't worry about it. I'll give you money for a new one, but only a used one." I don't have money for a brand new one. I was incredibly touched. I always thought Mr. Kwang rarely spoke to anyone, but I never expected him to be so kind. As we were talking, the doctor and Mrs. Lan, the landlady, approached. I sat up. The doctor immediately said, "You're awake now, are you? Don't have such foolish thoughts, okay? This will only worry your parents." At this point, not only the doctor but also Mrs. Lan and the entire boarding house thought I had attempted suicide. I truly couldn't explain it. The doctor then gave me one last general checkup and discharged me, all my vitals perfectly normal. Returning to the boarding house, all women looked at me with sympathetic eyes. If I had been taken to the hospital that night and never woken up, they would have immediately checked out and moved away. That's why Mrs. Lan, the landlady, had been at the hospital, closely monitoring whether I lived or died. The woman from the 9th room went inside early. Remembering that night, I couldn't help but shiver. Perhaps I really should move, as the vendor lady had suggested. But where would I find a room as clean, affordable, and with such an easygoing landlady as here? Many places had high prices, and the rooms weren't necessarily as nice. From now on, I will refer to that old man as Old Man Tan. I had seen his spirit twice. The second time, he even spoke to me. I wondered what his next appearances would be like. That night, I fell asleep until midnight, when I was startled awake. Just as I had predicted, Old Man Tan's spirit appeared to me again. This time, he woke me up and sat right at the foot of my bed. Startled,